This is solstice season, so we're going to make some cards. So for this solstice card, you're going to choose between two formats, one with a single flap or one with multiple flaps, like this. The idea behind the card is that the sun powers the chloroplast to make sugars, which are burned by the mitochondria. Your first choice is going to be to decide whether you want a single flap book like that or a multiple flip book like this. If you want the single flap book, you're going to get a piece of paper that looks like that, and for the multiple flap books, you're going to get one that looks like this. So step one is to pick the piece of white paper that you want to use as the inside of your card. The one with the big solstice is for a one flap book, and the one with small solstice is the one with multiple flaps. So the base of the card is a piece of black cardstock. So you're going to line up the black cardstock with whatever white piece of paper you choose, and you want them to line up nicely. Okay, so when we staple this together, I'm realizing it works best if we staple underneath this dotted line, because that's where we're going to fold it. So I'm going to put one staple here. I'm going to turn it like this, make sure it's lined up, that this is even. I'm going to put another staple right there. This is one of the most important steps. Make sure you staple underneath the dotted line, inside the box. So it's underneath the dotted line, inside the box. Then we're going to cut this paper out. The size is important because if you cut it carefully, it will fit inside of a business size envelope like that. Now we're going to fold it in half on the dotted line, like so. We're going to glue next with a little bit of Elmer's on an index card and a toothpick to smear it very, very thinly. The thinner, the better. Using that toothpick is what we're going to do next. So be very sparing with the glue. The first thing we're going to glue is the top flap. We can use a glue stick, but again, we have to do a very, very thin layer of glue because we don't have very much glue stick. And we'll supplement that with some Elmer's with a toothpick to make a very, very thin layer of glue and glue that to the top like so. If you're making a single fold book like this, you don't need to do the next set of cuts. However, if you're making the multiple flap book here, you're going to need to make the next cuts. So notice which card you're making before you make any cuts. If you're making the multiple flap book, you're going to cut very carefully up to the dotted line on the side that has the descriptions of what the organelles and what the solstice is. So be very careful. You're cutting only up to the dotted line, and you're only cutting the side that has more of the text on it. So be careful. Your next step is figure out what sun, what chloroplast, what glucose, and what mitochondria you want. So first, pick a sun, cut it out. Next, chloroplast, cut it out. Pick a glucose molecule, cut it out. Pick a mitochondria and cut it out. When you cut it out, notice I'm not cutting around each shape, except I did here. You can do that. It's much harder to do that. The thing that looks fairly good, I think, is if you just make the squares roughly the same size. They don't have to be exactly the same size, but in the same ballpark is a good idea. When you're using a glue stick, just make sure that you use it very sparingly with just maybe a little dot of glue on each of the corners to glue them down. Don't worry about slathering with glue. Use the glue very sparingly and thin. When you're finished with this, we will glue a mint down somewhere on the document. You'll be thinking a little bit, maybe in pencil, who you want to send it to. And there's a little place for a note. Then on top of the note, we can tape down a lifesaver on the one that's got the multiple flaps on it. That works as a good spot. If you're using the single fold card, you're going to put the wintergreen lifesaver on top of the large O in solstice. And if you can tape it so it flips up like that, it works kind of nicely.